teacher, as a person, as a performer, as an observer of the world, yes, it's been an unusual year. It's been very different for everybody. I've escaped any illness, and I've been perfectly well this year. My family has been well. I know people who have had COVID, but nobody personally who's been very ill or who died from it. And so I've been fortunate in that way. You know, a year ago, basically a year ago, almost today, March 8th, was the last concert I played, basically. That week I played a concert March 5th with Tina out at Stony Brook, a program that we really enjoyed and that we were proud of, which we did The Rite of Spring. We did En Blanc et Noir of Debussy, which is a very late piece of his, and we did Mother Goose Suite of Ravel. And then we thought this was particularly nice. We asked our colleague, the vocal teacher, Brenda Harris, if she had some students who might sing with us. And we did a beautiful set of Schumann called Liebeslieder, like the Brahms, and it's for four singers and piano four-hand. And it was a particular pleasure to do that with the students, and it's particularly beautiful music and not done so often. And to have that participation is sort of what Stony Brook is about in a certain way. And then I did have a concert in New York on March 8th at Tully Hall, and strangely, even though there were premonitions of what was going to happen, the hall was totally full, and people, sitting one next to each other, crowded next to each other. My daughter came, one of my sons came, my grandkids, for some reason, they were around, and yet there was a kind of anxiety among all the players, particularly the ones from out of town, didn't shake hands, didn't hug. They were anxious to get back home. They were afraid that air travel would be stopped. There was this premonition of things that were about to happen, that it was going to be a troubling time.
Yeah.
But it was a nice concert. And
what'd you play, Gil?
Well, the big piece was the Schumann Quintet. And it's a piece I'm always a little bit afraid of, and that, it's always kind of a mental challenge for me to do it. The third movement and is fast and a lot of octaves, and so I'm always a little anxious about that piece. And, unfortunately, we remember our bad performances rather than our good performances.
Yep.
So I remembered some less than stellar performances of the piece, and so I looked upon it as a challenge, and happily I was left with a good memory because it was a really nice performance. Also on the concert were some really beautiful Schubert songs with a very lovely singer whose name I don't remember, and also on the program was this very wonderful piece by Chausson. It's called Chanson Perpétuelle.
Oh, cool.
String quartet, piano, and singer.
Oh.
And it's a most ravishing piece. And so it was a really wonderful program, and to at least do the program and feel, wow, that went well, was a good feeling. And after that, actually the next day, I took my granddaughter to the opera and to the Met. She had not been to the Met. She lives in New York, and we saw La Traviata. And strangely, although this is irrelevant to everything, the lead singer in Traviata was a beautiful singer, and fine. We enjoyed it very much. It was only later that I realized that I had sung I had not sung. I had played with that singer. I didn't realize it until this year when there was an interview for some concert that we had played together.
Oh my
And I
God.
said, oh my God, this is the person that did Traviata on that Monday, March 9th at the Met. And I had no idea that I had played with her. And she turned out to be also a very lovely person of Cuban descent and a very up-and-coming young singer. And we did Shepherd on the Rock.
Oh, fabulous.
And so that was nice. Then Tuesday and Wednesday of that week, I went to Stony Brook. And then that was it. That was March 11th. And I think every organization shut down on March 13th.
Yeah.
The Philharmonic, the opera, everything shut down. All right, so we couldn't shut down school in a way because we have an obligation to our students. And so what was Zoom? No, I had never heard of Zoom, didn't know what it was, and so we were told a little bit about it, and so we started Zoom lessons. They were very difficult at first because the sound was very poor. It was hard to teach without being in person.
Yeah. What's hard about it? Is it just, I mean, I know I've also been teaching nonstop on Zoom, but also for, artist level graduate students, it must be a very different experience.
Well, it is, but as time went on, particularly toward the end of the year, and I kept teaching into end of May and June, even though the semester ended, early in May. There began to be things that one could see as positives. For myself, the idea that I had to use words, that I couldn't touch people and show them if they were tense, where they were tense, that the wrist was holding. I couldn't demonstrate because I wasn't near a piano. And so I had to say what I thought in words. Now, words are very interesting. And, you don't, I always try to speak clearly and rationally, but to really have to do it all in words is very different. And yet there are some compensations that you have to really express your ideas clearly, and that you have to try to see whether that person you're speaking to understands what they get out of it and how you can be effective with them. And so as time went on, it seemed to get more and more comfortable for everybody. All right, so then every festival that I had, and I usually have 3 or 4 festivals in the summer, every festival was canceled, of course, except they all tried to do something that was not exactly in person. They all tried different interesting things. For instance, one of the festivals I go to is called Yellow Barn, and the person who runs that, named Seth Knopp, is a very ingenious person and very brilliant at putting things together. And so what he did was to try to get a group of musicians and ask them if they could come up there and quarantine for 14 days, live in their own place, got them dwellings, not go out for meals, have meals delivered, not be with each other, just quarantine for 14 days. After the 14 days, they could come out of their isolation and they could be together. And they played concerts for the rest of the summer, for 5 or 6 weeks. And I went up once, but I played by myself because I was not in that bubble. And so I played in an empty concert hall except for the cameraman and the engineer.
And what did you play this summer?
I played the Concord Sonata, believe
That's
it
right.
or not, which I thought, well, I mean, that's a piece of Charles Ives that I've played a lot for a long time, and sort of, you know, I'm not exactly a youth, or even though I feel quite youthful. And when I played it, in the past, let's say I played it 3 or 4 years ago, I thought, well, this is probably the last time I play this piece. Not because I can't, but because it takes such a lot of energy and work. And I thought, well, I probably won't do this. But when I got asked to do something, I thought, well, and I got asked to do this piece, I said yes. And so I did it, and he even piped in a flute part, which is at the end of the piece. It's a very long and complicated piece, a beautiful, interesting piece, important American work of at least more than 100 years ago by now, but very modern sounding. And at the end of it, it has a flute. The images of the last movement is Thoreau and Walden Pond, and the sound of the flute over Walden Pond, a very beautiful image at the end. And usually, when you play the piece, you have a flutist at the back of the hall that nobody has seen before, and all of a sudden, this comes in, and it's quite shocking to an audience that doesn't expect it. And so we had recorded some flutist playing it, and so I coordinated with that recording for this. And literally, that was the last concert I played. That was July, early July. And so the rest of the year, you start teaching basically the end of August. Well, personally, I'm lucky enough to have a place in the Berkshires in western Massachusetts, and I went there in mid-June, and I stayed there till mid-October. And before that, you want to know what my year was like? Well, it had wonderful aspects of it. I've been over my whole life a very busy person, kind of compulsively busy. Not a day goes by without a great deal of planned activity of some sort. Teaching, rehearsing, traveling to rehearsal, going to somebody's event. I barely had just a day with nothing happening. And when I've had a day with nothing happening, I've had to practice because I had too much to play going ahead. And I'm not a quick study, and so I need to practice for my own sense of security and to play decently, which I try to do. And so this was a different year. I had no concerts, and I really did not mind that. I was able to see the passing of the seasons. I had never done that before. I'd never gone out and taken walks in the park here in New York. Where there's some beautiful parks, and where the blossoms, I saw the blossoms come out and then fall to the ground. I saw the flowers emerge, then other flowers emerge. I saw the season pass, so I saw the spring. It was very beautiful and very satisfying. And so in the meantime, I was teaching. I was meeting with colleagues. We were talking about the next year, but I didn't have to travel, and I didn't have to literally prepare for serious performing events. And it's not that I didn't play the piano. I like to play the piano. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to do, and the material for it is wonderful. And so I started looking at material that I had never played without stress, without thinking, oh, I'm going to perform this. Just thinking, I'd like to have this in my hands and be able to, play it and enjoy it. So I've done some of that. I went up, as I said, to the Berkshires in Massachusetts from mid-June to mid-October. saw the summer passing by, the fall, beautiful fall there. And then when it began to get dark and, chilly, I went back to New York. I like to be in New York in that time when you don't notice how dark it is because there's so many lights in the city and there are people walking around all the time and there's noise. So there I was back in the city where I live, where I've lived my whole life, and perfectly fine. I didn't long to go up to the Berkshires. I took walks again in the city, and my granddaughter lives here, and so I saw her. One of my grandsons lives nearby. He would come in on a Saturday. We'd take a walk together. And as I said, I've been teaching the whole time, and tell you the truth, the students are good company. I'm not lonely because I have so many people to deal with, so many interesting people, and so many talented people, and so many people at an important time in their lives. And also, strangely, on Zoom, there's something a little more intimate about the contact. I'm talking about with adults. These are adults. These are people basically in their 20s. I have some students who are near 40. But basically, nobody's like a teenager. Nobody's, undergraduate. They're all graduate students. They're all mature people at important times in their lives. They're worrying about their future. It's a big deal. And so I think they're more willing to share their feelings, their anxieties at a distance on Zoom than they are in person. I think there's a little bit more sense of protection from being just in the same room and kind of being vulnerable in that way. And I think they're more ready to be vulnerable, and we're more willing to discuss issues that are troubling or important or even celebratory in their lives. And aside from playing, of course. And I don't feel that anybody has regressed. So it's been all good in that way. And I meet all the time with different people. It's hard to squeeze in things like a walk, a meal. It's really unusual. I'm teaching some people in Korea. Well, in Korea, it's 13 hours ahead. Okay, so I teach them at 10 o'clock at night here in New York. It's 11 in the morning there. I have some students that I've never met, except at their audition. So I don't even know them personally, but I'm getting to know them. I feel like I know them.
Yeah.
So that's what the year has been like. And today, Liz, it was even today, just before I got on this Zoom call with you, I was thinking, I was playing something. I was at the piano saying, gee, maybe I should play a recital next year at school. I think in the 50 years I've been in school, I've never played a solo recital. So,
really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
So this is your 50th year at Stony Brook this year, isn't it?
I don't know. It's 50, 51, something like that.
That's amazing.
I've played the Concord Sonata. I've played many recitals with Tina, my dear partner, my piano partner, who was a former student, actually, years and years and years ago. I've played with the Emerson Quartet. I've played with other faculty members. But I don't think I ever played a full solo recital. And so I thought, well, damn it, maybe I should do that. These are beautiful pieces I've been looking at. You know what I've been looking at? Sometimes I've been looking at pieces that I was inspired to look at by teaching them, like the G major Schubert Sonata that you and I spent time on.
We spent a long time on that.
It's such a beautiful piece that I've been doing it. Other pieces like Brahms' Opus 76, I've never played them, and I don't think I ever taught them. and my God,
they're good.
They are good.
They're good.
Well, there's 7 of the 8 that I like, and so I don't care. So I don't have to play 8. I'm going to play 7. What's going to happen to me? It'll ruin my career.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you'll be okay. You know, that's kind of interesting. We're at such a transitional point in this profession right now. Do you think that this is probably the most transitional period that you've seen in your lifetime?
Well, I think it's been coming on, and this will dramatize it.
Yeah.
We've been thinking, realizing for years that the profession is very fragile, and that you don't hear our music on the radio anymore. When I was growing up, there was live music on the radio either. So we've all realized that things are fragile, that orchestras are in a difficult state now. Classical music, as we know it, as we call it, is a difficult state. How can we do better? And it's not easy. Everybody's tried. All symphonies have wrestled with this, tried outreach programs. How do we reach underserved communities? How do we reach minority communities? How come we're so white in our profession? There's something wrong with that. We're not reaching a large number of people who have every reason to do our music. It's great music, it's great art, and who are extraordinarily talented. They may not have the means to buy instruments, to pay for lessons. They may not have it in their history of their family to know this music. So there's something wrong. We've got to do something about it. And this has all brought it, very dramatically to the fore. What even, as I said, what our curriculum should be. How do students reach out? Maybe one of their recitals should be something that they produce themselves, that they arrange for a recital, that they publicize, that they get an audience, that they get colleagues to play with them. During this year, you know very well, there have been countless concerts put on this ridiculous medium, on Zoom. I have many people that I know, former students, even present students, that are putting on series of concerts during this time. That's great. Even Lincoln Center putting on the programs that they've put. They've manufactured programs about different, centered around different performers. Well, those programs have reached thousands of people, many more people than would ever reach a live performance. And I was on one of them, and I had 10 auspices this year that wanted to speak to me and present the program, and then wanted to interview me after the program, and present it to their patrons, because their patrons were starving for music. And so shouldn't we learn from this that this is a good way of presenting music to people, not instead of, but in addition to live programs? I mean, so some things we never dreamed of doing. For instance, as you know about this class that I've done this year, thinking that the students who are really being deprived of community, of being together, of listening to each other, of having classes together, even of being socially together because they had to be isolated, as we all did. But as I said, I have much to keep me, interested about this life. But they don't. They can't play with other people. They haven't had live recitals. They haven't been able to get together with their friends. I mean, it's been, terrible deprivation. So I thought, I tried to think of something that could involve a large number of the people in the community, that could involve music that they'd all participate in, that we were able to have guests, because you could get a guest from anywhere in the world to come in on your Zoom. And so I had a little program this year, not for credit. They didn't get any credit. They didn't have to enroll. They didn't have to be. No attendance was taken. My attendance was not taken. I was not paid. It happened to be, I thought, the Bach partitas, the keyboard partitas are both great pieces. They're important pieces. They have many movements, so if we have 30 people in the class, there are maybe 50 movements in the 7 partitas, 6 partitas in the 7th called French Overture, that everybody would play. And then I was able to get my very wonderful colleague, a harpsichordist on the faculty at Stony Brook named Arthur Haas, to come and join us. He has a world of knowledge that I don't have at all, and that none of us have, and that we're playing pieces written for his instrument, and we're doing transcriptions for our instrument. So how does that affect what we do? What should we take from the way harpsichordists would play it? Should we try to imitate that? What part of it would be useful and make it more, let's say, valid in a way, and yet to be real piano pieces? And so that was such a pleasure to do for me, and I think for
well, it certainly was for me. Yeah, I think it was for all of us in that class.
Well, it was amazing, and
yeah.
Also we played recordings from, and it was eye-opening and illuminating in a way for me, maybe for Arthur too, and certainly for the students who were participating. So at the end of the year, of the semester, they said, hey Gil, what are you going to do next semester? Which sort of took me a little by surprise. But then I thought, no, we're also not in person. Let me try to figure out something else to do. So I figured out something that we're in the process of doing now, which is the music of Couperin. Couperin is the music of a great French Baroque composer that we don't know at all. We play a lot of Bach, but very little Couperin. Yet it's great music. We should know it.
It's hard to translate. It's a different idiom.
Absolutely.
But that Couperin class has been a total revelation for me. Actually, I'm going to record that Passacaglia that I learned for the class. I'm playing it in 2 weeks at Icicle, actually.
That's great.
I mean, that was one of my favorite things that has happened this year was that Couperin experiment. I know it was only 3 weeks long, but
it was very wonderful for all of us. And after that, I've been spending it'll be 4 weeks, I believe, on Chopin mazurkas, including recordings and including mazurkas of Szymanowski, who died in the 30s, but is also Polish and also wrote mazurkas, and those are mazurkas that we don't know really. And so I had 5 of them and maybe 20 of the Chopin mazurkas and recordings of at least 20 mazurkas from 20 different artists, from Rachmaninoff playing the piano to Horowitz, again to people like Igor Levit, who's living now and playing now, to Rubinstein. Again, amazing how different all the playing is, how much possibility there is, how much freedom there is, and different styles of playing. And then we had that, and the next thing that's happening is, again, incredibly exciting to me. I don't know how many of your listeners know about Bill Bolcom. Bill Bolcom is quite a genius. He's a great composer, and at a certain point in his life, and even to this day, is a composer of ragtime music and an expert on ragtime music. Ragtime music comes from the early part of the 20th century. A man named Scott Joplin. I don't mean to be condescending, but I don't know how many people know Scott Joplin and a lot of other black composers, primarily black men who were composers in the St. Louis area, and basically invented this form of music of ragtime. It's a music that's extremely, it has a nostalgia to it. It's both exuberant and full of sorrow. I mean, it's very great music, and Bill Bolcom is an exponent of this music. He's an expert. He was very close to U.B. Blake, who was a great player of ragtime, who lived to be almost 100 and played almost till he was 100. And Bill is a great composer of ragtime music. He's composed works that are classics. And he's generous enough to say, yeah, I'd love to come to the class. And so he's going to come for 3 sessions of ragtime, in which he will speak to us about what ragtime is. We'll hear his playing of ragtime. He's recorded some, and he's a great player. And everybody, people in the class, will play rags from early in the 20th century, from Joplin and his cohorts to Bolcom.
So I see it. Oh, sorry, Bill.
Yeah, so we're doing that for the next 3 weeks. We're taking a week off this week, and then if I can say, I'm sorry to speak so much.
No, I'm glad.
After Bolcom, we have a great jazz teacher at Stony Brook, and that's another of the things that we've realized. Hey, jazz is American music, is the American music. Why don't we feature that in our studies? And improvisation is a great feature of jazz. Why have we lost that art? That's an important art. Beethoven, of course, improvised famously. Mozart, of course, improvised his own cadenzas. I mean, that was a great art. Mendelssohn could sit for a whole evening and improvise for hours. We've lost it. Sad to say, I lost it. And people of my generation lost it, and of this generation. Well, it should be brought back. It should be a part of our studies. You know, I'm looking forward to it. And then we'll end with Bach again, just one English suite, the 6th English suite, and so that'll be this semester. So have I said enough about this year, Liz? You asked me one question. I told you, forget about your questions. It's not going to be like that.
Well, it seems like a lot of what you're highlighting is the positives of the year. That it's been a year of a lot of transformation, but that there has been this way in which you've been able to access people in different ways than we've ever been able to. Just the fact that I can interview you now for Ross McKee based in San Francisco and you're in New York, or you can invite Arthur to your class. Yep. You know, there's this beautiful collaboration, even though we're so isolated from each other. Like a lot of people in my generation, like, my husband too, are rethinking their relationship to the profession. Sure. And what it means to survive as a musician.
That's wonderful and important.
Do you miss performing?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I think most of my colleagues miss it very much. I don't.
How come?
Well, first of all, one thing I've sort of said to myself, I've done, if I never do another concert in my life, it's okay. Is sort of the way I've put it to myself. Because I've done, hundreds of concerts, and that's part of it. When I turned 80, which is now 5 years ago, believe it or not.
Yeah, I remember.
And I can't believe it that I'm that age. When I turned 80, I said, okay, maybe this is a valedictory kind of year for me. It happened that the Chamber Music Society at Lincoln Center asked me to do a solo concert. Okay, not on my birthday, and I don't know if they knew it was my birthday. It doesn't matter. my birthday year. So, like in the spring, late spring of that year, I did a solo concert there. I did 2 pieces that I commissioned for the concert.
I remember, yeah.
And I played the Concord, and I played a 3rd piece that had been written for me and something else.
You did processional too, right?
Yeah, by George Crumb, and I did another. So I thought, okay, great. And then on my birthday itself, I went to Icicle Creek, which you know very well, in the Cascades. And because I knew that my family would need to make a fuss about it, even though I don't really like my birthday or birthdays particularly, I decided I'd preempt them. And instead of allowing them to make a fuss about it and have a kind of, gathering, which would be, for me, awkward, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to go to Icicle Creek if they let me, play a concert on my birthday itself, and invite my whole family to this very beautiful place. And so that'll take care of that. And I did that. All the family came. The 3 children, their mates, and the 6 grandchildren, they all came. And I indulged myself. I played a concert, and that was it. We had a nice meal afterwards. Okay. And then that summer at the Music at Menlo Festival, I was asked, again in advance, I don't think it had anything to do with my birthday, to play the last Schubert Sonata. So that's a piece that, is a major work in the repertoire of a composer that I hold very dear. And so I played that. And, all of the concerts were very satisfying. And as I said, concerts don't always go well, and you don't always, part of what you do as a musician is you go on. You try to forget the bad concerts and go on to the next concert. And I've been lucky in my life that I always had a next concert so that I could go on. And so I thought, well, this is a fitting kind of valedictory, kind of summation for me. And all right, but I've happened to live another 5 years in the meantime and play a lot of concerts in that time with no reduction in my activity, teaching full time and playing. Even though the year after my 80th birthday, I had a kidney transplant.
Right.
That didn't seem to bother me at all, basically. And it hasn't changed the way I feel.
Certainly hasn't slowed down your performing schedule.
It hasn't done anything. It's been really kind of, absolutely miraculous and incomprehensible to me. But I'll take it. And so I've continued to just do what I do. And so this is another time when I say, okay, if I never play another concert, that's really okay. But there's some concerts coming up, and so that's okay too. I've enjoyed not having the stress also of preparing for concerts, even though I play a lot of concerts and I try to do it without, making a big deal out of it for myself. They are a big deal. You're doing something public, and you're presenting yourself, and you're presenting great art, and you want to do it well. And there's something stressful about that. So, it's like when I spoke to a record company, and they said, whenever you want to do a recording. So about the same time as my 80th birthday, I said, okay, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll do a recording. So I spoke to them. So I'll do late works of Haydn, Beethoven, and Schubert. That's a nice idea. It's a kind of valedictory. So, and then they said, the recording business is really defunct now. It's very bad, and you're not presented. So they were good friends, and they said, well, how are you going to pay for it? And it took me by surprise because I didn't realize that you had to pay to make your own recording. And so I said, hey, it's okay if this recording doesn't happen. The world does not need another Schubert B-flat sonata recorded. It's perfectly okay. And I really felt that way. But they raised the money somehow. I mean, without telling me, they raised money. And they called me and said, hey, you know, we'd like you to do that recording. And we've managed to raise the money for it.
If you've been on a lot of recordings, Gil, how many recordings have you been on? Do you know?
I sort of know because well, you know, there's a book that's being written either by me or about me. I can't quite say which.
The joint autobiography.
It's a combination of that. And in the book, the person writing it wanted to know how many recordings I did. And dear Perry Goldstein from our department, I don't know how he had the time to do it, because I had no idea. I think he found that there were 128 recordings.
Oh my God. You've been on 128 recordings. How did you manage to record so much?
Well, that's a good question.
That's an insane amount of recording.
It's misleading. It's misleading, the amount, because some of it were live performances, like from Menlo. And on some of it, I played one of the pieces on the recording. So it's not exactly 128 full recordings. It's supposedly 128 recordings on which I appeared in some reasonably prominent role.
That's still a very, very large number.
It is.
Do you remember what your first recording was, Gil?
Do I remember what my first recording
was? Was it the Ives violin sonatas?
Yes, you're right. That's interesting. Well, you know, I don't know if you know that story.
I do, but I'd love to hear it again.
Well, my goodness. So when I was a young man, I guess I was about 25, and I had begun to dabble in newer music out of necessity. My training was in all the great European music that we all know and love, from Bach onwards. And that's what my teachers did, and that's what I did. And so my history is that I was not a person who entered competitions, didn't think of myself in that way, and didn't feel comfortable doing that, nor did I think it was of any use to me. And so I was not that kind of a person, musician, but I very much wanted to find my way in music. And so as a young man, I went to college rather than conservatory, and as a young man I sort of I did go to summer festivals. So I went to Tanglewood, and then I went to Marlboro, and so, you know, I was in music in a way, but not full-heartedly, not wholeheartedly. All right, so I got out of college, and then I was in a group. Somebody asked me to join a group. It was a large group, and in it we played. We could play any chamber piece because there were like 4 singers and every instrument.
What group was that, Gil? Was that?
It was called the Gramercy Chamber Ensemble for no good reason, I don't think, but anyway, that's what it was called. And you know, all these things that you do in life that you don't think will be anything lead somewhere often, or they did in my life. And so in that group was a young woman named Jan DeGaetani, who was a singer, who I didn't know at all, but she was one of the 4 singers in the group. And so when we were discussing programs, one of the other players in the group, not her, suggested a work called Pierre Lunaire of Schoenberg. And we all said, well, what's Pierre Lunaire of Schoenberg? And really, we were ignorant. And I was ignorant. So he explained what it was, and for those of you who don't know, it's a work it's 21 poems of a German expressionist poet, and they were all set to an instrumentation which has now become known as the Piero instrumentation, because it's been used so often in the 20th century, of piano, violin, doubling viola or separate violist, clarinet, doubling bass clarinet, cello, flute, doubling piccolo. And so that was Piero. There were these 21 poems. And beyond all that, who said the poems? There was a so-called singer. But the singer did not exactly sing. The singer did what's called Sprechstimme, which was an invented term, and was part singing, part speaking on a kind of pitch. There's kind of a history in German music of works by Schumann, I know particularly, and maybe called monodramas, in which there's a narrator, and under the narrator is this piano part, and so, and Strauss did it also, and there's a tradition of that in German. I don't know whether this sprung out of that. So the singer had occasionally to sing absolutely marked pitches, but generally it was not marked on a staff. It was marked with a kind of up and down trajectory. So it would tell the singer, okay, here you go up, here you go down, without absolute, pitches. Although it had pitches, the first performance was done by an actress, not a singer. And so Jan in our group took it on, and so we did that in New York in 1958, I believe, or 59, and it was a big sensation. This young group playing this piece that was very rarely done at the time, that was supposed to be incredibly difficult. We rehearsed it for, literally a year in different parts. We were, none of us, incredibly busy. So we could get together, 2 or 3 of us at a time, and rehearse. We rehearsed it really well. Jan did it all on her own without listening to. There was an old recording of Schoenberg doing it, quite a terrible recording, because his players couldn't play it, for the most part, or some of them couldn't play it. Although there was a great pianist, Edward Steuermann, whose name belongs in this story. So we did it, blah blah blah, and it got a lot of attention. And so one day, a young violinist named Paul Zukovsky called me up, who I didn't know at all, and he said, I know you've played the Piero Lunaire of Schoenberg, and we're doing it at Juilliard. He was in Juilliard, and he said, we're doing it with Steuermann playing the piano, but he's ill, and could you come and sit in on a rehearsal, because we're rehearsing it whatever day. And I said, sure, that'd be nice. I'd like that. And with a different singer, or Sprechstimme person, and with a conductor, whose name was Arthur Weisberg, who also figured a lot in my life later on, as did Jan, and as did Paul Zukovsky. So all of these people, out of this one little accident of, this performing this piece. So you asked about my first recording. So Paul, I did the rehearsal. That was fun. And that was that. Then Paul called me, and he said, hey, how would you like to play the 4 Charles Ives sonatas? And again, I more or less said, who's Charles Ives? I never heard of those sonatas. But yeah, why not? I was a curious person. And also, I needed to do things. I couldn't not do things. I married early. I married when I was 22. And, I needed to do things, and I did whatever came up. And I was also open to new things. And so we got together, and it turns out these are very the major pieces for violin and piano that were basically hardly done. And we spent a long time rehearsing them. We planned a concert in a church in Brooklyn, which is more the way things happen nowadays, but so not in a big venue, but in a church. And we played it in a church, and literally there were, I don't know, 10 or 12 people there. And my feeling was, oh my God, I've spent so much time learning this extraordinarily difficult music. Okay, I'm glad I learned it. It's great music and very interesting. But my God, put in such effort, and for 10 people. However, one of the 10 people came up to us and said who he was, that he was a kind of an Ives groupie. That was music that he loved, and that what he did professionally was work as a recording person for a label called Folkways, which does not exist, F-O-L-K Ways. They recorded music from all over America, basically, Appalachia, wherever. And he would be the person that they'd send out to do the recording. It was a wonderful label that did indigenous American music at a time when it wasn't being done. And that was their mission. But he had permission to record anything that he wanted as their, chief recording person. And he said he wanted to record us in the Ives sonatas, and he did. And that recording is still up on YouTube, people tell me.
And now you've had such a long relationship with the music of Ives, and been such an important part of your life. That,
and that Jan became a lifelong partner of mine, Jan DeGaetani, that we worked together for the rest of her life, which was cut off too short in 1989. And with Paul Zukowski for many years, doing many, many projects and recordings too, for like 13 or 15 years, with Arthur Weisberg, who conducted and led a group called the Contemporary Chamber Players that got a grant from a foundation to be in residence. I mean, these were things that totally transformed my life. I think we've talked a lot about a lot of things.
I think we've talked a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this, Gil.
Sure.
Coming back to Menlo this summer?
Yes, they're.
Are you you're gonna be there in person?
Yeah. They're having, all the festivals are doing something in person. So we're having less students because people can't travel from where they are sometimes, and we're playing with the students. It's a different kind. They're inventing things. They have a new hall, by the way.
Oh wow, cool.
A new hall. We are all changed, I think.
We're all changed. We don't know how we're changed yet. I think that's
right.
the thing.
Things
are all different, but we don't know what it means. It's going to take a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think you're changed?
Absolutely. I'm fundamentally altered. I miss performing so much. I feel completely lost without it. I was so depressed when my spring concerts were canceled.
I understand that. I mean, I was, I think most of my colleagues feel that way. Certainly the students feel that way. And I think I'm a little bit of an outlier for whatever reason.
Your book, what's it called?
The original name was Gilbert Kalish, American Pianist, and I believe that's the name.
Gilbert Kalish, American Pianist. It's a good title.
Is it? I don't know. Well, that's what the guy who wrote it wanted.
Who's the guy who wrote it? What's his name?
Oh, my God. There's too many stories with that. His name is Bob Freeman. He was the director of the Eastman School for 30 years or something. Should be. I can't
wait. I'll bring my copy to Menlo for you to sign.
Really?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I thought of this as kind of a private thing for my family, and I didn't think of it. This is a public thing, but it's on a press, and I don't know how it will be handled. So maybe I'll be going to Barnes and Noble all over the country.
Yeah, there's going to be a card
and signing my book.
That's right. You're going to have a book
and all my recordings, also selling them.
150 of them.
Right.